but me, your man, Louie T. Welcome to the 2020 NFL Draft Wrap-Up Series, where your man Louie T aims to break down all 32 teams in the National Football League's 2020 NFL Draft using our brand new grading scale from 5 to 1. Each pick will be assessed a score, 5 being the highest, 1 being the lowest. We will then tally up all of those scores, divide by the number of picks, which will yield us an overall grade for that team's draft. We'll then move on to the next team in the series picked by you. That's right, you, the viewer out there, are in total control, as this is the You Pick format. Simply be the first to leave a comment in the comment section of this and future videos stating 2 things: the phrase next and the team you'd like to see next. Some examples would be Niners, next, 49ers, next, San Fran, next, SF. You get where I'm going with this. As a matter of fact, the next team up in the series is none other than the NFC Super Bowl runner-ups, the NFC Champion San Francisco 49ers. I think that sounds better. When you say runners-up, it reminds you that you lost. NFC Champion San Francisco 49ers, and what a run it was last season. It was almost like a magic carpet ride that just seemed like it was never going to end. The defense was dominant. The run game was dominant. And this team had the Super Bowl within their grasp. Literally, with the final 7 minutes of the game, they were up 2 scores and looked like they were in the driver's seat. And somehow Patrick Mahomes did what Patrick Mahomes does. And the Chiefs ended up winning the Super Bowl. But if you're the 49ers, you're in a really good spot. And I talked about this on IG with the post that previewed this breakdown, that there wasn't much that needed to be done here with the 49ers. Everything's pretty much still intact. I thought that they made some really shrewd moves that, if they are successful, the ones that they did complete, if they're successful, this team could actually be better off than they were a season ago, which is really hard to imagine. Now, there is that component of last year they were the hunters. This year they're going to be the hunted. No one really saw what they did coming. However, you look at, the tackle position. If Trent Williams is what he was prior to the whole medical scare and all of that stuff, if this guy's back to what he was as an all-pro type of tackle, that may be an upgrade over what you had at the tackle position prior, with the retiring of your longtime left tackle, Joe Staley. If Javon Kinlaw comes in, he can't possibly be DeForest Buckner right off the bat. I don't think I see that happening. However, if he comes in and he's more than serviceable right off the bat, and you see the makings of a guy that could be a stud, that's going to be good enough to get you by, because you already got a beast right next to him. And so you're fine in Eric Armstead. So I think everything you did here, you got to pick for a guy that you had no plans on re-signing. The 49ers are in a really good spot right now. John Lynch is maneuvering. Yeah, you didn't have a ton of draft picks, but the ones you did get were very impactful. And I thought wide receiver was arguably your biggest need heading into the draft. Obviously left tackle with Joe Staley wanting to retire was the biggest need on the board at the time. But getting Trent Williams for really next to nothing, essentially a 5th round selection and a 3rd next year, I mean, you can't do it much better than that if you're the 49ers. So when you look at taking care of tackle without actually having to spend draft capital on it and getting a guy that's ready to win now, you're in win now mode. We don't know when that window is going to close. And so you can't wait on a left tackle, which is the most important position on the line, to come along and figure it out. You got a guy that knows what to do right now if he's healthy. And so to me, getting a defensive lineman was like icing on the cake at number 14, and you traded back to do that, so you were able to pick up some draft capital in doing so. I just felt like everything the 49ers did this offseason worked in terms of how it looked from the outside looking in. Now we'll see if it really pans out for you as we get closer to the season, but they're pressing all the right buttons in San Francisco. I'm a huge fan of Kyle Shanahan, and now watching John Lynch work, he's won me over as well. This is a great pairing, and The 49ers had it's only 5 players. All right, it's a bread, egg, cheese, milk type of draft. In, out, done. However, the players you got here, even down to the very last selection, to me, serves the purpose. And I think this is a quality draft turned in by John Lynch and company. Let's take a look at what they did here in the 2020 NFL draft. As you see the 5 selections on the screen in front of you, I'll be breaking each and every single one of them down. I've got my write-ups right here in front of me. I'll be reading from these as we assess each of these picks and players as we start in the first round. 14th pick overall, defensive lineman out of South Carolina, Javon Kinlaw is the selection. 6'5", 324 pounds, 35-inch arms, 6 tackles for loss, 6 sacks, no forced fumbles, 2 pass breakups, 1 blocked kick in 12 games in 2019 for the South Carolina Gamecocks. For his entire career, 18 tackles for loss, 10.5 sacks, 3 forced fumbles, 10 pass breakups, and 3 blocked kicks in 37 games. So here's a guy that was able to impact the game, not just on defense, but also on special teams. I had a mid to late first round grade on Javon Kinlaw. So essentially coming off the board at 14 was right around where I thought the sweet spot was for him. Didn't see the top 10 that everyone kept talking about, but I did see a top, 20, top 15 to 32 type of guy. More closer to 20 than 14, but that's nor here nor there. You had to react and get the guy when you had a chance to get him. You pass up on him at 14, and there's no chance you get him back at 29 or wherever you were that second time around. So this was the time to do it if you were the San Francisco 49ers. And so I had him as my number 2 defensive tackle on the board. He went second off the board, the second defensive tackle off the board. So it made a lot of sense. And when you look at his size and his stature and the way he's built, this is the kind of defensive interior lineman that the 49ers go after. We talked about DeForest Buckner and him being traded to the Colts, which was a fabulous move. You talk about Eric Armstead. Those guys look like duplicates of one another. You talk about Julian Taylor, who you drafted about 3-4 years ago, who also looks similar to these guys. It's 6'5", long arms, 300 pounds or so. And now you're looking at Javon Kinlaw, another 6'5", 320-pound defender. So these are the kind of guys that they look for. He's a little bit heavier than what they've done in the past. Usually the guys that they draft are 6'5", 6'6", 6'7", 305 pounds, 295, 305, somewhere in that window. He's a little bit heavier. He's the biggest of all the guys that they've drafted, but he's got quite a unique set of skills, which is what the 49ers look for at this position. You look at his size as his first strength and length. And so those are the things that jump off at you right away is 6'5", 324, and 35-inch arms, which is just utterly ridiculous for an interior defensive lineman. And again, this is what the 49ers do. This is what they're looking for at that particular position. So he kind of checks all of the boxes there. You talk about his strength. That's right now his biggest attribute, is his strength. There's a sprinkle of quickness in there, but the strength right now is grown man-like. And it helps aid him with the bull rush. It helps him control the rep. And so his strength right now is probably his best attribute. The bull rush I just mentioned comes from that strength and the length. And so when you get that kind of leverage, when you get that kind of extension, you're able to lock a guy out and then push him and control the pocket. So his bull rush right now, one of his best moves. He's got some quickness. And so you'll see that show up every now and again. I'd like to see him maybe drop a few more pounds, maybe get to 318, 317 pounds. He's really interesting because you had the offseason surgery for him, so he wasn't able to work out at the combine. You got all this downtime. This was a guy that dropped 40 pounds. He was a JUCO transfer to South Carolina, and over the time being in Columbia, he dropped 40 pounds, and you're thinking to yourself, well, goddamn, how big was this guy actually? This was a dude that was up around 370 pounds. So, for him to be 324 is great, but I think he can drop even more weight, get into even better shape. We're going to find out just how much Javon Kinlaw loves football when he comes back after this long hiatus, because normally coaches would have already gotten their hands on Javon Kinlaw in rookie minis and things of that nature. They really can't track his progress in terms of how well he's keeping himself in shape. I'd hate for him to show up at 6'5", 335 come training camp. We'll see. Obviously, they've got Zooms and things like that to see how guys look, but you can never tell how these guys are actually conditioning themselves, because he's a big dude, and I'd like to see him get into even better shape to be a more dominant force, and that quickness kind of highlight itself. He's got a good motor, though. He hustles, plays hard. That's what you're looking for, especially on the defensive line. A lot of times you can get guys who don't give maximum effort. They're big guys. They get tired very easily, and sometimes when a guy gets tired, the motor shuts off. He's not one of those guys. He gets his hands in the passing lanes. To me, that is important. That is imperative. When you're a guy his size with the kind of length that he has, you have to get your hands up. The 10 pass breakups are remarkable, but you know what? That's expected from a guy his size, and I'm glad to see that he's delivering on what is expected, because you would be shocked at how many times I watch guys on tape and look at the body of work that they've produced in a 3 or 4 year career in college, and they're big guys, 6'5", 300, and you know what? The weight doesn't really matter at that point. If you're 6'5" and you got 35-inch arms, you should be deflecting passes. You're not getting to the quarterback on every snap. You should be knocking the football down. And to me, a pass breakup, a deflection is just as good as a hurry or a sack. Nope, it's not pushing them back and making it 3rd and 18. But what it is doing is canceling out a down, and they're not gaining any yardage. So instead of it being 3rd and 5 after a 5-yard check down, it's now 3rd and 10, and that's a lot harder to convert than 3rd and 5. So I think that's awesome, and that's what you are supposed to do. And I liken him to a guy like Raekwon Davis, for instance, at Alabama. No pass breakups. The guy's 6'6", 311 with 34-inch arms, and he's got no pass breakups. That's just ridiculous to me. So Javon Kinlaw delivering in that department is huge, and I'm glad to see him do that. Scheme diverse. Here's a guy that can play in an odd or an even front. So whatever you decide you want to do, the 49ers employ a 4-3 defense, so he's going to be in an even front. So that's not really much of a discussion anymore. But the case was, look, if this guy got drafted by a 3-4 team, he could play in that and thrive and flourish as a nose. You could play him at a 5-tech. You could play him at a 1-tech. You could play him at a 0-tech. Wherever you wanted to play this guy, I think he's probably best suited as a 3-tech at the next level, but 3-1 doesn't matter. This guy can play inside, can play outside as a 5 if need be. So that was something that I noticed. Stack and shed capabilities. With that kind of length, you should be able to stack and then disregard that offensive lineman. Look, you don't get drafted in the top 15 picks if you can't stack and shed. If you can't take a lineman and toss him aside and get to the ball carrier, you don't belong being drafted in the first 15 picks. So again, that's something that we anticipate he should have been able to do, and watching the tape, he does do very well. And then finally, special teams prowess. Do not discount the importance of special teams and being able to block kicks. 3 blocked kicks, 1 each year that he was on campus. That is stellar. Okay. And not everyone gives maximum effort on specials either. That's not something you should take for granted. And you never know when that's going to show up and save you in a game. Don't forget that these extra points are no longer gimmies. These are 33-yard extra points. You never know when a guy like Javon Kinlaw is able to break through the line, get his hands up, and deflect one of these, and you end up winning a game by 2 points because the team had to go for 2 at the end of a game to try and tie it instead of kicking an extra point. So that's also something that is a big strength for him as well. Weaknesses. He struggles to hold up versus double teams and down blocks. For a guy his size, you'd like to see him be a little bit stouter against those types of blocks. But I kind of get it at the same time. Big upright guy. If they come with great leverage, they get up under your pads, they can drive you out. But that's no excuses. I'm not going to make any excuses for him. You got big tree mountain of men in your on your team right now in the trenches, on the defensive line, in the interior of that defensive line that don't get moved by double teams as is. So I'd like to see him be a little bit stronger at the point of attack against double teams and down blocks and not get washed out of his gap. Fails to use his length to his advantage effectively enough. 35-inch arms means there should be a latch and snatch. That's, to me, mandatory. When you've got that kind of length, you should be grabbing that guard or that center or that tackle, and you should be snatching him and, latch, which means to grab, and then snatch that propels you towards your target. That to me is a given. You have to be able to utilize that kind of maneuver. His length, there should be a one-arm stab, a long arm of the law, as I like to call it, but some people call it a pole vault, whatever. There should be a one-arm bull rush with that kind of length. In the bull rush department, one is always better than two if you do it right. And so there's a lot of what he needs in terms of technique and tutelage. He needs a lot of work. He's still extremely raw when you look at Javon Kinlaw, but there's so many traits, so many workable traits that you can't teach. Either you have it or you don't. I mean, you're either born with 35-inch arms or you're not. And so there's so many things that he's still yet to tap into and learn, that if he's coached up like the other guys have been on this 49ers defensive line, there should be a huge payoff down the road for you with this guy. But he's not using his length to his advantage, to its fullest capabilities right now. And no plan, just brute force right now. And I talked about his strength being the biggest thing that he uses to make plays and impact the game. And that's fine for right now. But as you get to the NFL level, guys across from you are strong as well. And you're not just going to bully guys around. You're going to have to figure out a way other than just sheer brute force to accomplish what you're trying to get accomplished. He's going to have to learn how to use that quickness that I referred to. He's going to have to learn how to use that length, as I just mentioned. He's going to have to learn creative ways to get to the quarterback, to penetrate into the backfield, tackles for loss, blow up plays. He's going to have to learn other ways other than I'm just going to use my brute force to get done what I want. And there is a time and a place for that. That shouldn't go away. It shouldn't be at the expense of his bull rush or his strength. But he does need to start coming up with other ways to impact the game. And then he had hip surgery. All right, so that's a little bit of a cause for concern. Anytime you start talking about a hip, I get nervous. It's one thing if you had shoulder surgery, a torn labrum, or you hurt your wrist or something like that. That's totally different. When we start talking about hips and knees and things like that, probably more so than even your knee. You start talking hip, I get nervous, especially for a big guy like this. So that's just something else, that's on the Carfax that you need to keep in mind. But leaves a lot to be desired from a technical standpoint. I've kind of mentioned that, but just to hammer that home, right now he's raw. Just not technically savvy, not using a lot of moves. There's not a lot in his move Rolodex right now. He's not very skilled in that department. That's where you come in as a coaching staff. That's where the team comes in, and you got this blank canvas, essentially, this big slab of clay, if you will. Now it's your job to mold this guy into an all-pro, at worst, a Pro Bowl type defender. And so everything's here. Everything's here you're looking for. Now you've got to get it out of him. First round, 14th overall selection, defensive lineman out of South Carolina, Javon Kinlaw, for me, is a 5. This is the perfect draft pick here. It's the perfect replacement for what you just traded away in DeForest Buckner. It's a cheaper option. He's not default right now, but in 2-3 years from now, he could be exactly what Defoe was for you on his way out of the door. My comp for him, a lot of people want to compare him to one of the guys you already have, Eric Armstead, DeForest Buckner. He's neither of those guys. As I mentioned, those guys were right around 300 pounds. Those guys were a lot leaner. Those guys were a lot meaner coming into the league in terms of their skill sets. He's more Chris Jones to me, much bigger, just like Chris Jones. Chris Jones has a very, very dangerous skill set at this point of his career. When he first came in, he was a little raw, but he had everything you were looking for: length, size, strength, and quickness, which are all the things Javon Kinlaw has. But he was sculpted and molded into a dangerous pass rusher to the point now where he's one of the best interior pass rushers we have in our game. And so when you look at Javon Kinlaw, he's got all the ingredients necessary. Now it's all about getting that out of him. As we get to the next selection in this brief but impactful 49ers draft, still in the first round, 25th overall selection, wide receiver out of Arizona State, Brandon Ayuk is the pick. 6 feet, 205 pounds, ran a 4.5 flat at the combine, 62 grabs for 1,192 yards and 8 scores in 12 games for the Sun Devils, to go along with 11 punts for 226 yards and a touchdown and 14 kick returns for 446 yards and no scores. In his career, 98 grabs for 1,666 yards, 11 scores in 25 games, 25 punts and 93 yards and 1 score, to go along with 29 kickoffs for 785 yards and no scores in that same time frame. So this is a guy that came from Sierra College and transferred over to Arizona State. So only 2 years playing at a major FBS school. So this is a guy that put up some big time numbers in that short period of time, especially in 2019, which was his breakout season. I had a second round grade on him, an early second round grade. He was one of the guys that I did work on early in the process, and then at the very end, I doubled back and watched a little bit more of him because there were some people that I really respected that were really high on this guy, and I didn't necessarily see it. And I gained a greater appreciation for Brandon Ayuk later on in the process. And so I had him as my number 10 wide receiver. Had I went back and reconfigured my ranking, he probably somewhere in that 7-8 range, probably right around there. But he was the 6th wide receiver taken. I still didn't think he was going to come off the board in the first round. I thought there was a chance, but I thought he'd be one of the first receivers taken in the second round. He goes late first round to you. You trade up to grab him and get him. And I thought it was a really good move on your part to get the guy that you felt like you needed to go and get. And this receiver group needed a punch in the arm. They needed a spark. Emmanuel Sanders was that for you late last year in a trade that really helped put the offense over the top. He's no longer here. As a matter of fact, it's a double whammy. You lose him and he goes to a team that you're probably going to have to deal with in the NFC in New Orleans if they continue to play good football. So you needed to replace Emmanuel Sanders, and you did here with Brandon Ayuk. And you're hoping he has the kind of impact that your rookie receiver last year had in Deebo Samuel. And so quickness and speed are the first two strengths. His quickness is top shelf. It's what you're looking for at the receiver position. And those kinds of traits are usually a prerequisite for someone that is so dangerous in the returns department, punts, kickoffs, that kind of thing. So, the quickness is legit. The speed is something that we thought he was going to run faster at the combine. And I kind of knocked him a little bit for that. But when I watched him on tape, this is a guy that plays faster than 4.5. So I think on game days, he's a little bit faster than the 4.5 may indicate. And the acceleration is also top notch. So this is a guy that can rev it up. You see him when he gets out in space, run by guys, generally doesn't get caught from behind. The Oregon game is the one that did it for me. That's the game where he showed out in a big stage. Oregon contending for a chance at the playoffs and maybe a national championship. And Arizona State pretty much put that to rest on a Saturday night in Arizona. And it was a fun game to watch, and Brandon Ayuk put on a show. And so this guy has everything you're looking for in that speed, quickness, acceleration department. Run after catch, that goes without saying. When you talk about a guy with a background in special teams, kick returns, punt returns, that sort of thing, you naturally think that this guy's going to be great after the catch, and he is. He can make you miss. He can get yards after the catch, and so that's something that he definitely brings to the table. Deep threat. That's something that, at one point I was questioning, especially with the 4-5. Is he really truly a deep threat? But when you watch him on tape, it's a guy that routinely gets behind the defense, and the numbers bear that out. And in the Pac-12, they've got fast guys out there. It's not one of those conferences where guys aren't running fast. They've got some speed out there. So, to have 1,192 yards on just 62 catches speaks volumes about his ability to stretch the field vertically. And so he's definitely a deep threat at the next level. Versatility. This is a guy that you can play out wide. You can play in the slot. You can use him on jet sweeps, bubble screens, things you get in his hands quickly. But also the special teams component is a big added bonus when you're talking Brandon Ayuk as well. So his ability to run kicks back on both punts and kickoffs and help you at the receiver position is definitely something that you get in the Brandon Ayuk package. Production, like I talked about, a monster 2019 season that really catapulted his draft stock from, a third, maybe a second round pick to a first round pick, a day one pick. And so his production in 2019 was the catalyst that pretty much drove him into the first round. And this guy can separate. And that's what you're looking for in San Francisco. Jimmy Garoppolo, I contend, isn't as bad as everyone wants to make him out to be. I think Jimmy Garoppolo is really talented. I think people are really underestimating what he brings to the table. They think he's just a placeholder. He's not a guy that you can win with in this league. Well, you almost won a Super Bowl with Jimmy Garoppolo, and you could sit here and make excuses. Oh, it was the run game. Oh, it was the defense. There were games where Jimmy Garoppolo stepped up. There were games where Jimmy Garoppolo wet the bed, and in that fourth quarter when you needed Jimmy Garoppolo to step up, he didn't. But that being said, you need guys that can separate, get wide open, make it easy on Jimmy Garoppolo. Brandon Ayuk's one of those guys that can do exactly that. So that's something else you get with Brandon Ayuk. Weaknesses, but he can become a better route runner, and I think he will. He ran a limited route tree. A lot of him not running a bunch of routes isn't his fault. They just didn't do it at Arizona State, and that's fine. And so once he gets here, one of the easiest things to do is to teach a receiver how to run the route tree. It's like, it's like riding a bike for these guys. Once they learn, they've got it. And so he just didn't really learn it, and that's fine. Again, you get them in your system, you get them in your program. I mean, look at Deebo Samuel, for instance. What didn't come in running, a bunch of different routes, and didn't have to, especially in his rookie season. How many times did he run that drift route, as we called it in Washington? And I don't know if they still call it a drift route or not, but that dig route over the middle of the field off of, off of play action fake, off of RPO. How many times did you guys run that drift route over the middle field and he catches it on a dig and then has a bunch of space to operate and yards after the catch? Brandon Ayuk can do that as well. So there'll be ways to get him involved, but he'll learn the route tree. He'll be just fine. Adjust better to balls outside his frame. Now, this is something I do want to see him do a little bit better. Jimmy Garoppolo, as I just mentioned, not always the most accurate passer of the football. You're not always going to get the football right between the numbers or right in your face mask where you can see it. Sometimes you're going to have to leave your feet, go and get the football. Maybe it's going to be a little bit behind you. You're going to have to stretch behind you and contort your body to go and get it. I'd like to see him be able to stretch away from his frame a little bit more and catch it consistently. Didn't do that enough for me at Arizona State. Be stronger at the point of catch and the line of scrimmage. Teams are going to try him. Guys are going to test him at the line of scrimmage to find out where he's at. How strong are you? Are you able to deal with press coverage? Are you going to make guys pay for coming up in your face and deleting the airspace. He's going to have to prove to people quickly that I'm not to be reckoned with at the line of scrimmage. Don't try me or you'll pay for it. And then at the point of catch, when guys get physical with you, when guys lay hands on you, can you battle through that contact and come down with the football? I think he'll get some work in practice against guys like Dick Sherman, who are very physical at the point of catch. But he's going to have to get stronger at the point of catch because that's what's necessary at this level from elite level wide receivers. The ability to battle through contact at the stem of a route or ball in the air, ball imminently in your proximity. Guys are going to be grabbing, tugging on you, pulling on you, slapping at your arms and your wrists. Can you, despite the contact, despite the jostling, still come down with the football? And then fumbles. I just want to see him take care of the football better. He did a much better job of protecting the rock in 2019 than he did in 2018. He had 4 fumbles in 2018. That's a ridiculous amount of fumbles for a guy not touching the football, but so many times in a season. You're talking about a guy that's touching it less than, 75 times in 2018, especially. 2019, a little bit different. 25 kickoff returns, punt returns combined with the 62 grabs. That's 87 plus probably another 10, 11 rushes on the season. You were talking about a guy touching it right around 100 times. He had 1 fumble in 2019, so that's okay. I still like to see you take care of the football and minimize that to no fumbles, but to come from 4 fumbles in 2018 to 1 in 2019 shows me he's trending in the right direction. Nonetheless, my comp for him is Robert Woods, the Los Angeles Rams receiver coming out of USC and into Buffalo. I saw a lot of the same characteristics and traits that I see in Brandon Ayuk right now. And what Robert Woods has blossomed into is one of the better, more underrated receivers in this league. And if Ayuk turns into into Robert Woods, you got something here in your first round pick. And I think he's got the capability to potentially do that and maybe even be better than Robert Woods when it's all said and done. We'll see how he develops. But Kyle Shanahan's the man for the job. If you want to get a receiver and get the most out of that guy, if this guy comes in because he gives me, I think what Kyle Shanahan loves about him is he gives him those Pierre Garçon vibes. And if he can be that kind of guy, then you got yourself a dude. And so in the first round, 25th overall selection, wide receiver out of Arizona State, Brandon Ayuk, for me, is a 4. Big-time wide receiver, has a lot of potential. There are some question marks. We'll see if he's able to answer some of those questions. But right now, it's exactly what the doctor ordered for the San Francisco 49ers. And they needed to address the wide receiver position. They get one of the better ones in the draft here in the first round. So we move on to their next selection, 5th round, 153rd pick overall, offensive lineman out of West Virginia. Colton Mckibben is the pick. 6'6", 306 pounds, 34-inch arms, 12 games, 12 starts at left tackle in 2019 for the Mountaineers. For his career, 50 games, 47 starts, 35 of them at the right tackle position, the other 12 that came in 2019 at the left tackle position. So right away, you see right off the bat, you've got a guy with swing tackle ability coming off the bus. So that's something that the 49ers desperately need is more depth up front. I mean, hell, you were tested up front last year, and a guy that I didn't love, who you drafted late in the draft last year out of Vanderbilt, and Justin School, stepped in for you and did a Ullman-like job. Look, it wasn't always the cleanest, it wasn't always the best, but it got you through until the cavalry arrived and help was able to come. And so Colton Mckibben is much better than Justin School to me. And I think this is a really quality pick here in the 5th round. I had a 5th round grade on him, so you got him right where I thought he should have come off the board. Strengths, solid NFL frame. He looks the part at 6'6", 306. Can he get bigger and stronger? Absolutely, but at 6'6" with 34-inch arms, again, as I talked about with Javon Kinlaw, you can't teach that. Either you have it or you don't. Swing tackle ability, and I talked about that already, but just to reiterate, it's hard to find guys that can play both right and left tackle and play them both adequately. Some guys specialize on one side more so than the other. This is a guy that can play both sides. And so right away, you're getting a guy that's going to come in and compete to be your swing tackle, the first guy off the bench if something were to go awry with one of your tackles in a ball game. And that's the kind of depth you're looking for. Plenty of starting experience in the Big 12. That's paramount. You can't replace experience. You know, we talk about all this talent and all this upside, but the one thing you can't replace is reps. And this is a guy that started in 47 games and played in 50 of them in the Big 12. So got plenty of starting experience. Boy, is Colton Mckibben nasty or what? He's a nasty boy. Nasty boy. He's a nasty boy. Man, is he physical. Man, is he borderline dirty, and I love it. I mean, this is what you want. You want a Dirt McGirt trenches on the offensive line. One of those guys that is blocking dudes just because. Plays over. He knows it's over, and he still just gives the guy a late chuck. Like, get out of here. You know, you're not wearing the same color jersey as me. You're an enemy. And so I'm just going to lay hands on you just because. That's his demeanor. All right. If I can reach you, if I can touch you, I'm going to touch you. And if I can drive you into the ground, I'm going to drive you into the turf. Any chance I get to lay hands on you, I'm going to. He's just one of those guys that he's going to get under some defensive lineman's skin because after the play's over, right as the whistle's being blown, he's still blocking you like the play just begun. And that's going to get under some guy's skin. And I love it. I absolutely love it. Physical sustainer. He sustains his blocks. And not just like, oh, I got you, you know. No, he's literally trying to drive you into the sidelines. And he's literally trying to take you. He's the guy that runs you into the pile. And he knows, okay, play's over. And he still walks you into the pile, pushes you over the pile, and then rolls over and he's still blocking you after he's already knocked you over the pile. He just sustains at a different level. It looks different. Runs his feet through his blocks. When you run your feet through your blocks, it gives you a chance to not only sustain because you don't stop your feet, but it also allows you to seal off and wall off defenders. It allows you to continue that momentum that you've started early in the play. And it also allows you to take your ass and turn it to seal that guy off and give your running back or your ball carrier a clear delineation on how to cut off your block. So he does a really good job of running his feet through his block, continuing that momentum that he created early on in the rep, and allowing himself to also stay glued to that defender. Uses great positioning and tight hands to seal and turn defenders. I kind of just mentioned that his ability to seal and turn guys is uncanny. Does a really quality job of turning guys in the hole, turning guys, getting to some of those reach blocks, and then turning those guys. And that's a foundation of a Kyle Shanahan offensive lineman, is you've got to be able to get to some of those reach blocks, some of those backside cutoffs, things of that nature. He's able to do that sometimes, not all the time. We'll talk about that. But quiet pass sets is my last strength. There's not a lot of commotion going on, not a lot of arm flailing, not a lot of crazy feet. Everything is nice and calm and quiet with Colton Mckibben in his pass sets. They're clean, they're efficient, not a lot of extra unnecessary movement. He's mirroring guys well. Everything you're looking for in a pass set, he pretty much gives it to you. So I think he's really quality there as well. Weaknesses. He needs to get a bit stronger. The bull rush can be problematic for him at times. And that's where that 306 pounds comes into play. He's going to have to get a little bit stronger functionally. You know, and I'm not talking about him getting to 320 or anything like that. If he could put on an additional 7 pounds or so of muscle and learn how to anchor down a little bit better, I think that's all he needs to do. And he will do that, you know, gain a little bit of weight in the strength and conditioning program. So he'll get stronger. But that's not something that he is great at right now. At times, the bull rush can cause great strife for Colton Mckibben. Not a tremendous athlete. All right, so backside cutoffs are a bit of a struggle. I talked about in this system that Kyle Shanahan employs, you got to be able to move your feet. And he can move his feet well enough. He's not a tremendous athlete. He's not Joe Staley. He's not Trent Williams. Okay, but and he's not Mitch McGlinchey. He's not Mike McGlinchey either. But he can move his feet, and he can do enough to survive in this system that he was drafted to play in under Kyle Shanahan. And finally, sometimes his arm length reveals itself to be a problem. I'm not a big, you got 34-inch arms. The magic number teams are looking for, 34.5-inch arms or greater. Look, I'm not going to beat a guy up for having 34-inch arms. And his arms are a little bit south of 34. I round up. If once you're over, a half inch, I round up. His arms were like 33 and 5/8 or something like that. So they're essentially 34 inches. But at times it shows up. There was a play in particular against NC State where he got yoked up. And it was alarming because the only way you get yoked up is if you got shorter arms. That's why I talk about the latch and snatch being a great technique for guys with long arms on the defensive line, because you can control the rep with those long arms. And that's why I want to see Javon Kinlaw do. But Colton Mckibben was just minding his business, looking to get off another clean pass set when the guy in front of him grabbed him, shook him, and then all I saw was Colton Mckibben's head snap back like this and go flying the opposite way, and his guy went towards the quarterback. And I said, oh, shit, I had to rewind it, watch it again, and he got snatched up. And that only happens if you don't have long enough arms to keep a guy at bay. So sometimes his length can be problematic, but again, I think he'll be fine in that department. I didn't see it show up that many times, but I think this is a solid pick. I like him a lot better than I liked Justin School last year. And so here in the 5th round, 153rd pick overall, offensive tackle out of West Virginia. Colton Mckibben for me is a 3 as we continue on in this 49ers draft with your next pick, 6th round, 190th overall selection, tight end out of Georgia. Charlie Werner is the pick, 6'5", 244 pounds, 4.78 40, 9 catches for 78 yards and 1 score in 14 games in 2019 for the Georgia Bulldogs. For his career, 34 grabs, 376 yards, 1 score in 54 games. So not a lot of production there. I'll give you my comp for him a little bit later on. His strengths: he fights and blocks his ass off. That's his claim to fame right now. That's what he's going to do to keep him in the league. It got him a foot in the door. That's what's going to actually get him in the room, is his blocking ability, not his receiving ability. As you can tell, not a lot of production there. Will take on any defender at any time without caution. This is a guy that will just throw his body into any kind of defender, and at any point, this guy is willing to risk his body to get his job done. I'm watching this guy slam car crashes. I'm talking about serious car collisions in the hole at the point of attack, where he's slamming into guys that are 30 and 40 and 50 pounds bigger than him, and he doesn't care. And he holds his ground too. He's fighting his ass off. So that's his claim to fame right now. It's his calling card. Average athlete with solid hands as a reliable pass-catching option. Look, in Kyle Shanahan's offense, they've got a stud already. They've got a number 1 option, and usually Kyle takes care of that at the tight end position. He's usually got a guy that can catch it at the tight end position, and so he doesn't need his 2nd or 3rd tight end to necessarily be a stud. He needs that guy to block, and more importantly, when they do throw it to him, catch it and make something happen. And Charlie Werner can do that. And the guy that he reminds me of, it's striking, the resemblance in terms of their play. And Kyle has always endeared himself to guys like that. And so for some reason, I think he's going to have a chance to make this football team, is Charlie Werner. Weaknesses: seems overwhelmed by pass coverage, or press coverage, excuse me. When guys lay hands on him, it takes him an inordinate amount of time to get into his route. It really disrupts him, makes him uncomfortable, and that's a problem for a guy that already isn't a tremendous athlete to begin with. So, you got to find ways to get him out naked, to get him out free. And Kyle does as good a job as anybody in the league at doing that. getting a tight end uncovered. It looks like he's washing a guy down. All of a sudden, he comes out the backside on a bootleg wide open. You flip it to him, and now he's rumbling down the sideline for a 14-yard gain. That's the role Charlie Werner's going to play in this offense. Short strider that struggles to create separation or extra yardage after the catch. Man, it seems like he's running with a fridge on his back. I mean, it's just rough for him sometimes when he gets the football in his hands. But again, just get him out in space. And once he gets going, you see the athleticism, but it takes a while. Shorter arms for a tight end his size. Generally, when you see a guy this size, 6'5", you're talking about 32, 33, normally like right around that 33 arm department, somewhere in that range. This guy's got 31-inch arms, so really short arms for a guy his size. And when you're talking about blocking guys that have 33, 34, 35-inch arms, makes it a lot tougher on a guy like Charlie Werner to get his job done. More importantly, it makes it harder for him to sustain. If a guy's got 33-inch arms, you may contact him, but he can then, if he's strong enough, can then bench press you off of him, extend his arms, and now you can't reach. So it stops him from being able to sustain his blocks. But the initial contact is there. Lack of production is the last weakness. Obviously, not a lot of production here. It was funny watching him score his only touchdown of his collegiate career and how happy his teammates were for him, because they had watched a guy that went a full 3.5 years on campus without getting that elusive touchdown and tasting pay dirt. He finally gets in, and they were so happy for him. 1 touchdown in 54 career games. That's amazing. So he reminds me so much of Logan Paulson, the ex-Washington Redskin tight end. Kyle had him in Washington for a number of years. And then even you probably remember him if you're a 49ers fan, because Kyle actually brought him to San Francisco for a brief period of time. So he's looking for his new Logan Paulson, his new Selleck, if you will. One of these guys that can block and catch the occasional pass. Charlie Werner's going to be that guy for you. I fully expect Charlie Werner to make this team. And when you look at the tight end position, there's not a lot there behind George Kittle. So, and I liked what Dwelly did last year. There's a spot for one more tight end on this roster, and I think that's going to be occupied by Charlie Werner when it's all said and done. And finally, we wrap up and Charlie Werner for me is a 2. He's just a blocking tight end right now. I don't think there's much other value than him blocking, and that's okay. That's what Kyle drafted him to do. That's what Kyle is going to ask him to do, and every now and again, Kyle's going to throw him a bone. And so we move on to the final selection in this draft for the 49ers, and it's one that I actually like. Liked it more than I thought I was going into the pick. 7th round, 217th overall pick. Wide receiver out of Tennessee, Javon Jennings is the pick. 6'3", 215, 32-inch arms. Ran a 4.72, which is what turned me off, and I thought he wasn't going to get drafted because of it. But Kyle saw value in what this guy brings to the table, and I see it as well. 59 grabs for 969 yards and 8 scores to go along with 13 rushes for 51 yards and a score. This was a guy that was a dual threat quarterback coming out of high school, so you can do some things with him creatively in the run game. 13 games. Those stats came in 2019. For his career, 146 grabs, 2,153 yards, 18 scores to go along with 25 rushes for 43 yards and 1 score. So and that was in 51 games. I'll give you my comp for him a little bit later on, but his strengths: physically imposing wideout. He looks the part, man. He looks big, he looks physical, and he's all of those things. So he looks the part of a big, physically imposing receiver that's going to be able to manhandle smaller defenders. Doesn't mind doing the dirty work. And when I look at this receiving core in San Francisco, you've drafted a bevy of different type of guys, but none of them have stepped up and been an alpha in terms of size. You've got a bunch of smaller receivers when you look at the mix. Now, you got the one receiver, I can't remember his name at this very moment, but he's been solid for you, but he's not a thick, a stout guy. He's tall, like 6'2", 6'3", but he's not physical, like a Javon Jennings. And even a couple of guys that you drafted the Baylor running back / wide receiver, Jalen Hurd. Haven't really heard from him, whether it's injuries or what may have you. Haven't really heard from him. Thought he would be this kind of guy for you, but you haven't really gotten anything out of him. And this is a guy that'll go over the middle. He'll take the shot. He knows the safety's bearing down, doesn't care, holds on to the football. He'll block in the run game, and so doesn't mind doing the dirty work. Toughness and strength at point of catch. I talked about Brandon Ayuk needing to be stronger at the point of catch. Javon Jennings is exactly that. Man, I saw this guy take some hellacious shots catching the football and holding on to it. And that's so big. When a quarterback can trust this guy over the middle of the field, squeeze it into tight spaces and knows that this guy's going to come down with it, it does something to that quarterback mentally. He knows I can take some risks that I can't take with other guys because my guy's going to win for me. So he has that ability at the point of catch to be tough, strong, and come down with the football. Grown man run after the catch. People beat him up for the 4.72, and rightfully so. That's too damn slow. I mean, I just told you Charlie Werner is running a 4.78. You can't be that close to a guy that's, not as athletic like Charlie Werner in terms of a 40 time, but where he makes up for it is run after the catch. You get it in this guy's hands and just move the hell out of the way and he'll do the rest. I mean, I'm watching this guy drag 2 and 3 defenders, run through arm tackles, break tackles on his way to the end zone. And so he just turns into a man beast once he gets the football into his hands. And he can track the deep ball. I was surprised to see how well he tracks the deep ball. He won't be getting many of those at the next level running a 4.72. However, if you throw it up over the shoulder, he can find it in the air and go and get it, which is a really, really stark contrast to what I was expecting from him in that department. Weaknesses. He lacks the speed and quickness teams generally look for. Obviously, I'm not telling you anything you don't already know. Running a 4.72, not the fastest guy in the world, and his quickness, not what you would call top shelf. So it is what it is. You know what you're drafting when you get a guy like Javon Jennings. You're not getting quickness and you're not getting speed. Due to his inability to consistently beat press coverage and simply separate versus sticky man-to-man, he's probably going to be relegated to the slot, which is perfectly fine. He played a ton of slot at Tennessee. He's effectively a big slot. And that's what I thought Jalen Hurd was going to be for you. And maybe he still ultimately will be for you. But haven't seen that manifest itself into anything at this level. And so just more competition at that position. Another guy that's big that can be physical for you in the slot. But he can't play out wide because guys have a really high hit rate at hemming him up at the line of scrimmage. And then even if he beats that press coverage, he's not going anywhere. And so they're right in his hip pocket, ready to make a play on the football. And so every now and then there's a concentration drop. I saw more big-time catches than I did big-time drops. There was one that was off-putting against Florida in the end zone, early play in the game, first possession or so. They drive it right down the field. And look, he had some bad quarterbacks. He played with about 97 quarterbacks in 2019. So, watching him, make plays with the amount of quarterbacks he had out there speaks volumes. But, they move it down the field and they get into the red zone. And he did most of the heavy lifting on that drive. He had like 50 some odd receiving yards on that one drive, got him all the way down there on a third down. He runs a curl right at the goal line. He's in the end zone. Yeah, it's a hot sauce to go on this pass. And you'd like the quarterback to take a little bit off, but guess what? You're in the red zone, tight windows. You got to put a little zing on the football. And it goes right through his hands, hits him in the face mask, carries him up in the air, gets picked off. That can't happen. But again, more big catches than I saw drops on tape. But this is a guy that also, and this is on the Carfax, was dismissed from the program back in 2017, had a wrist injury that he missed the entire season, essentially played a game and a half, and then wrist injury comes. He felt like he could have come back late in the season. They just went ahead, put him away, put him on the shelf. He was disgruntled, took to social media to voice his displeasure with that decision, and he ultimately was booted from the program by the acting interim head coach, Brady Hoke. He was ultimately reinstated by the next head coach that came in, but that's also on the Carfax. At the end of the day, this guy has some talent, and there is a niche he can carve out for himself as a big physical wide receiver in this league. I comp him to Duke Williams, the Buffalo Bills wide receiver. If you remember Duke Williams from Auburn a few years back, didn't get drafted in the NFL, ended up going over to the CFL, dominating, and then coming back and actually did some really good things in that playoff game versus the Texans last year for the Buffalo Bills. So I see Javon Jennings in that same vein. Duke Williams ran a slow 40, didn't get drafted because of it, had to go prove himself in the CFL. Javon Jennings is getting an opportunity as a draft pick. Let's see if he's able to make the most of it. For me, in the 7th round, Tennessee wide receiver Javon Jennings is a 3 to round out this 49ers draft. It was an impressive haul. Only 5 players, but getting impactful players at positions of need. You needed to address the wide receiver position. You did that. You needed to address a defensive tackle. You did that. You needed to address tight end. You did that as well. So, and you needed more depth at tackle. You did that. So you did a lot of things. The only thing I didn't think you got a chance to do was address the secondary. You could have used some more depth at corner and safety, but it is what it is. At the end of the day, these 5 picks amount to a 3.40, which equates to a B, a solid, strong B for John Lynch and company. And really, this offseason was an A. If everything works out, they got better, which is hard to do when you go, 13-3 and steamroll your way through the playoffs into the Super Bowl. It's hard to be better, but if everything works out for the 49ers, they may ultimately be better in 2020. We will see. But that's going to do it for me, your man Louie T. Thank you for joining me. Remember, if it's not your man T, it's not, I repeat, not the best NFL coverage it could be. Like this video, subscribe to the Louie T Network if you haven't already done so. Also, make sure that you hit that notification bell so that you don't miss a thing here on the Louie T Network. Also, a great way to keep up with what's happening here is on socials, whether it's Twitter at Louie T Network on Twitter or on IG, Louie T Network _. And don't forget to check out the Louie T Network podcast. That's available wherever podcasts are available. The Louie T Network podcast definitely up there. Brand new episode available, so make sure you check that out as well. Signing off. I'll see you guys next time. Take care. Stay safe. We'll reconvene later to talk more San Francisco 49ers football. But until then, have a good one.